The changing of the guard from Twins owner Calvin Griffith to Carl Pohlad has been and continues to be a long and complicated process.
But at the very least, a ceremonial obstacle in that process will be completed, will be overcome at home plate in Metrodome tonight. We go live again to Bob Bruce at the Dome to resume our coverage. Bob?
Well, Cindy, how long have we been talking about, are the Twins going to be sold? Who is going to buy them? Is this guy going to buy them? Is that going to buy them? Well, it's all going to start tonight, as you said. This is it for Calvin Griffith. A bit later tonight, it will officially be announced that Calvin has sold the Twins to Minneapolis banker Carl Pohlad. At 6 o'clock tonight, the two men will appear at a news conference here at the Dome. Then at 7:30, the changing of the guard will take place in a home plate ceremony just prior to the Twins game with Chicago. There is still some legal work to be done before the sale is finalized, and of course the transaction still must be approved by the Major League Baseball owners, so the deal won't finally be complete until sometime probably in mid-July. But for all intents and purposes, tonight is the night that the team will be sold to Pohlad. Now, as far as the price tag on the 52% of the Twins held by Calvin and his sister Thelma Haynes, well, that went for $32 million. Pohlad is also interested in purchasing the minority interest in the Twins, which was sold to the Tampa Baseball Group, you remember, earlier this spring. But his deal with Calvin is not contingent on those negotiations with Tampa. Now that the deal is set, the Twins are only a matter of days away from some changes. The team will be moving from a family organization to a serious business. And Pat Milan is in the stands with a report on what will be done, especially as far as marketing the team in the future. Pat?
Well, Bob, beyond the structural adjustments in management, the really big changes we'll see will come in the area of marketing. The Twins are in contention with their division leader. So now Carl Pohlad will be looking for ways to get people excited about baseball in Minnesota once again. And one way he'll try to do that is by following the marketing plan that was developed by the Major League Baseball Task Force. Marketing, advertising, and education. That's what the 218-page study of the trouble with Minnesota baseball deals with. It is a plan that Carl Pohlad has already studied. Some of the points have caught his attention, the same points that have been ignored by Calvin Griffith for years.
Because of Calvin's age, and excuse me, Calvin, for referring to your age, there was a certain amount of uncertainty as to ownership. And when you have that uncertainty, I think it does have some effect on the ball players subconsciously and the entire organization. So, yes, we have to run it as a business. Most teams are operated today on a business-like basis.
Pohlad says Calvin Griffith did not believe in many of the ideas, and he didn't have the money to fund them even if he had liked them. Some basic necessities of the business world are about to become a part of the Twins organization. The team advertised once before.
Tell them like it is, Coos.
Right.
The Minnesota Twins. This year, we've got something to prove.
Look for the advertising to return. Most people, for instance, have no idea who the Twins really are. Outside of Kent Hrbek, they don't know many of the names. Advertising will help that problem like it has in the past.
Minnesota Lumber Company. Big Dan Ford. Bad Glenn Adams. Craig Mongo Cusick.
Dick Pomerantz wrote the marketing plan for the Twins. One aspect involving season tickets is already being organized. A group called the Twins Ambassadors will take over season ticket sales next year.
If you go by the Kansas City and the Baltimore approach, it is the approach to season ticket sales.
The ambassadors will be accountants, attorneys, corporate people at the middle rank who love baseball and are in a position to sell season tickets. Serious promotions to draw fans back to the team are under consideration. Many of the ideas are fundamental ones that over the years have been rejected by the Griffith clan. Pomerantz says Carl Pohlad will have to do more than just change the team's uniforms and logos to get people back to baseball in the Dome.
If everything is purely cosmetic, nothing will be done. You can say all you want in the newspapers about the change, but if there isn't that commitment to change, the words come up empty and the new logos come up empty. I don't think that.
Pomerantz believes Pohlad will make the necessary changes, and it seems pretty assured, especially if you hear Carl Pohlad tell you what he wants.
Calvin tells me, and Howie Fox tells me, that they're one or two players away from being a real contender. But I want to tell you, I don't believe in being number 2, 3, 4, or 5. I believe in number 1, being number 1. And we're going to do everything possible to be number 1.
Sounds pretty exciting. A few years ago, 43% of the Twins fans came from the upstate area. Now only 7% do. Now that's a third of their attendance that's missing. The marketing plan shows that half of those people went to the Met for tailgating as much as they did for baseball, and the Twins are hoping to draw some of those people back with their beer and brat tent that was constructed outside the dome just a few weeks ago. Back to you, Bob.
Thanks, Pat. Change seems to be a popular word tonight. Of course, for Calvin Griffith, it will be an emotional night. The franchise, after all, he's selling to Pohlad, has been in his family since 1920, and Calvin himself has owned the club since his uncle Clark Griffith passed away in 1955. It also means changes for the players on the team. How will it affect the team? Well, Larry Burnett is standing by right now with Ken Herbig. Larry?
Well, Bob, one of the young men who used to watch the games at the Met and used to see the great crowds and used to see the great Twins teams, of course, one of the better-known players on this team is Kent Hrbek. A lot of changes going on for this team. How do you feel about the changing of the guard tonight?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I'm kind of excited to go line up out there and meet Mr. Pohlad and see what's going on as far as the front office part of it is. Guys are excited about it, too. We're wondering, I guess Mr. Pohlad's got a little gift for us, and everybody's been trying to figure out what it is. But hopefully we can put on a show for him tonight as long as it's Mr. Pohlad's night and put on a good game here. Got a big game against Chicago tonight, so we're going to do the best we can.
There are many of us in the media and throughout the community that are just as glad that this thing is finally over because it's gone on and on and on for weeks and months and even more. Same feeling on the team or a different feeling?
Well, I don't think it really has bothered us that much. The thing that really only bothered us was when they were talking about it at first, when they were first starting everything off, and we were winning ball games. We were up in first place at one time, and they weren't writing about the ball club at all. They were writing about the sale of the team, and that's the only thing that really bothered us at all. But now they've got back to us, and everything's settled there, and we're going to go out there and play our game now.
Very quickly, you were listening to Carl Pohlad say he plans on being number one. How does that make you feel?
That's just the way I want to feel and want to be.
Okay. Kent Hrbek, who grew up in the shadow of Met Stadium, now in the Metrodome, now looking ahead to new ownership for the Twins. Bob, let's go back to you.
Thanks, Larry. Well, that's it for right now, but at 6 o'clock, of course, Calvin Griffith and Carl Pohlad will hold that news conference, and on Eyewitness News at 6, we'll bring you up to date on that and have much more on the transfer of ownership tonight here at the Dome. Cindy and Dennis?
Thanks a lot, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
We'll see you at 6. Coming up next, though, the latest on our...
Well, Bob said it, historic, and it certainly is that tonight. A lot of emotion going to flow down there at home plate, and it's just a matter of a couple hours now, or less than that, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it is indeed a historic night here at the Dome, and you can feel it a little bit. They expect a larger-than-normal crowd. As we told you earlier in this newscast, Calvin Griffith is less than 2 hours away from officially signing his Minnesota Twins over to Minneapolis banker Carl Pohlad. The price tag, $32 million for the 52% of the team, which for years has been held by Calvin and his sister Thelma Haynes. Some legal work must still be completed before the sale is finalized, and of course the transaction must be approved by the rest of the Major League owners, but really at this point those items are merely formalities. At 7:30 tonight, Pohlad will assume ownership of the Twins in a home plate ceremony prior to this evening game with the Chicago White Sox. Now right now both Pohlad and Calvin are holding a news conference here in the Metrodome, and Channel 5's Rob Lear is standing by live with a report on that. Rob?
Thanks so much, Bob. You are watching live a news conference that's going on, and for the last 20 minutes, members of the press here have been talking to both Calvin Griffith and new owner Carl Pohlad. Calvin, your thoughts at this hour, and our viewers are now watching you live.
Well, I tell you, it's going to be a very emotional thing when I get on the field, facing the fans and everything face to face. And of course, this right at the present time is very calm. I've been going through these for very many years, and been answering all these kind of questions for all the years. So I've taken my time and thought about very carefully what to say. So the emotion will be there, I think, because baseball means so much to me and my family. And but being with Carl Pohlad, he's assured us that we're going to become partners practically in the thing, and that's the name of the game. So I feel very confident that there won't be very many changes.
Thank you so much. Calvin Griffith, Carl Pohlad, addressing the Twin City media here live as they address some questions. Bob, let's go back to you.
Calvin mentioned, Rob, thank you, this will be an emotional night for him. You know, the franchise he's selling has been in his family since 1920. And Major League Baseball has been Calvin's life since he was adopted by his uncle, Clark Griffith, back in 1922. Of course, at that time, the franchise was the Washington Senators. Calvin became the owner when Clark passed away in 1955. And it was Calvin's decision to move the team here to the Twin Cities in 1960. He will remain with the Twins in a management capacity under Pohlad. But without question, it won't be the same for Calvin. We'll take an extended look at his life in baseball tonight on the Eyewitness News Update. As far as Pohlad is concerned, you can expect some changes in the operation once he officially becomes the owner. Financially, Calvin has been running the club on a shoestring since free agency and multi-year contracts became part of the Major League Dictionary in the 1970s. But those days really are over, or at least they soon will be. Well, the Twins this season have been very competitive in the American League's Western Division, but competitive will not be enough for new owner Carl Pohlad.
Calvin tells me and Howie Fox tells me that they're one or two players away from being a real contender. But I want to tell you, I don't believe in being number 2, 3, 4, or 5. I believe in number 1, being number 1. And we're going to do everything possible to be number 1.
Needless to say, the players will be affected by those changes if and when they do take place. How do they feel about the new ownership? Well, let's go down on the field to Larry Burnett for that story. Larry?
Bob, what's lost in all this is that there's going to be a baseball game here at the Metrodome tonight. The Twins are playing the Chicago White Sox, and it's a big game in the division. At 7:10, there'll be a home run derby between Tom Brunansky and Greg Luzinski. The players, though, are interested in what's going on. They have some feelings on it, and they'd like to meet Carl Pohlad. We talked with them just a little while ago to see how they feel about this changing of the guard.
Guys are excited about it, too. We're wondering, I guess Mr. Pohlad's got a little gift for us, and everybody's been trying to figure out what it is, but hopefully we can put on a show for him tonight as long as it's Mr. Pohlad's night and put on a good game here. Got a big game against Chicago tonight, so we're going to do it best we can.
I've seen a lot of things happen in the 3 years I've been here, and this is baseball history, I guess, for Minnesota anyway.
This man has a little bit more money, so I think the guys are a little excited that, hey, he's going to try to build a winner. So he might go out and get some of those the weaker spots that we have, say like on our bench, to strengthen that up a little bit.
I'm happy that Calvin's going to get some money for the club and go and enjoy himself. I hope he enjoys himself because he deserves to. And he gave a lot of young players a lot of opportunity to play in this game, and we understand that, and I just wish him the best.
Well, the players are interested in meeting the new owner. They're interested to see what gift he has for them tonight, but they're more interested in playing the Chicago White Sox. They'll play tonight. Bob, back up to you.
Thanks, Larry. Well, that's it for now from the Dome. But, of course, we'll be back tonight with full coverage of the Twins' sale and special reports on Carl Pohlad and Calvin Griffith on the Eyewitness News Update. Stan?
Thank you very much, Robert. And we all look forward to Bob's report tonight on that 7:30 ceremony. The changing of the guard. The torch is passed tonight, Cindy. And you can bet, of course, there was plenty of emotion out there tonight when that signing finally took place. Sportscaster Bob Bruce was there, and he's here with details. Quite a night.
It was a very emotional moment, Stan. You know, he wasn't always the most popular of Minnesotans, but regardless of what you thought about Calvin Griffith, you had to feel something for the man tonight as he officially announced the sale of his baseball team to Carl Pohlad. Channel 5's Rob Lear is standing by at the Metrodome for a live report. Rob?
Well, Bob, it was a history-making night here at the Metrodome. It was also a very emotional night, where earlier tonight, Calvin Griffith signed over his share of his Major League Baseball team to Carl Pohlad. The two men were chauffeured to home plate for the formal ceremony just prior to tonight's game against the Chicago White Sox. Once there, it didn't take long for each to put his signature on the piece of paper, which will transfer the ownership of the franchise from Griffith to Minneapolis banker Carl Pohlad. After each had a turn at the microphone, Calvin presented a baseball to the new owner of his Twins.
Carl, here is a new baseball, a brand new one, and I'm just hoping that you don't have too many curveballs in it.
I mentioned history in the making. There it is, as the man who brought Major League Baseball to Minnesota passes a ball to his and his ball club to the man who was vowed to keep the Twins right here in the Twin Cities.
This probably is the most expensive baseball in the world. So therefore, I will hold it up one more time.
Pohlad will pay $32 million for the majority interest in the Twins held by Calvin and his sister Thelma Haynes, but the spending won't stop there. Pohlad said tonight that he has made a commitment to bring a winner here to Minnesota.
I am committed and I am dedicated to make the Minnesota Twins not number 4, not number 3, not number 2, but number 1.
Financially, it is a good deal for Calvin. Nevertheless, it was a sad night as well, as Calvin met briefly with each member of the Twins. Many of the players used that opportunity to thank Calvin for giving them an opportunity to play Major League Baseball.
I'm forever indebted sir, and I appreciate everything you've always done for me.
Of course, Calvin will not be leaving the Twins. Nevertheless, tonight was a farewell of sorts because his Twins now belong to Carl Pohlad. There is a large, very large crowd here at the Metrodome tonight. Let's get a reaction from the fans about this big sales transaction. And for more on that story, let's now join Dennis Bound.
Thank you, Rob. There's a sign in the baseball press box that says sentiment when Mr. Griffith and Mr. Pohlad made their first appearances. But Calvin standing a more enthusiastic response, but make no mistake, for the most part, tonight, Calvin was very... You're going to miss Calvin Griffith?
Yes, he's colorful, but he's still going to be here. I don't think he'll be out of the press at all.
I enjoy the ceremony, and I think for the ownership, I hope he goes out and he buys 1 or 2 free agents. I think a couple veterans to study these younger players would really help the team.
You're going to miss Calvin?
Yeah, I think he was good. I think he was a real good manager.
You still like Calvin after all these years? You bet. He did a fine job. There is one sign left standing around the stadium that says, "Dear Calvin, thanks for the memories." And many people will, and they're looking forward to what Pohlad can do for the ball club. Stand
Well, thank you very much, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis.
Well, any owner is controversial. Those are pretty nice notices, though, coming for Calvin tonight. We will have more on the... Okay, here we go. Special reports now on the man who sold the Twins tonight and the man who bought them. Bob Bruce is here now with the first profile, and they are special. I got a little sneak preview of one of these, and these are
Well, Stan, it was for Calvin Griffith perhaps the most emotional night of his life. His Twins have officially become the property of Minneapolis banker Carl Pohlad. And while Calvin will remain with the team in a management capacity, he has relinquished the ownership of a franchise which has been in his family for more than 6 decades. Tonight, a special look at the man who brought Major League Baseball to Minnesota.
Calvin Griffith told it as it was. I'm honest, and I'm not afraid to look at you in the eye and tell you exactly what's what.
As of today, what's what for Calvin Griffith is a harsh reality. He no longer owns the baseball franchise that has been in his family for 64 years and has been the driving force in his life since 1922. Born Calvin Robertson in Montreal, Quebec on December 1st, 1911, Calvin began his lifetime education in our national pastime shortly after his 10th birthday. That's when he was brought to Washington, D.C. and adopted by his uncle, baseball pioneer Clark Griffith. Clark, a future Hall of Famer, joined the Washington Senators as a player-manager in 1912. 8 years later, he purchased the franchise for $250,000, a franchise that became Calvin's following Clark's death in 1955. It was 5 years after that, in October of 1960, that Calvin made a momentous decision. The Washington Senators would be relocated to Metropolitan Stadium in Bloomington, and his franchise would now be known as the Minnesota Twins. What followed was a decade-long honeymoon in Minnesota. The team was successful, both at the gate, where it annually drew in excess of 1 million spectators, and on the field, where the Twins won the American League pennant in 1965. But the honeymoon would eventually deteriorate into a marriage that just couldn't last.
I like Billy Martin personally. I think he's a real good asset to have on the ball club because he speaks his piece, and you have to have somebody that will waken up some of these ball players at times, and I think he's a good man to do it.
7 years later, Martin became his manager. But 1 year after that, Billy the Kid was gone. And so, too, was a substantial portion of Calvin's popularity.
Anytime that a person openly criticizes the organization, then he's criticizing me. And I feel that at times I'm supposed to be criticized. I'm not perfect. But you cannot come out and criticize the organization and get along.
I think Griffith made a big mistake, and I know one thing, I won't see another game next year.
If they don't win the division next year without a Martin leading, Calvin would have a very long and unhappy winter of 1970. The winter of his discontent, I'm sure.
The Twins did win the division the following year, but Calvin would have many winters of discontent throughout the 1970s and into the 1980s. Part of the problem was a change in the game he just couldn't accept. Labor disputes and free agency had made Calvin unique, a hardliner at the bargaining table, and a dinosaur among the new breed of owners who were both willing and able to pay the price.
Butch says he loves baseball so much, if he had to, he'd play for nothing.
I really like that kid. I don't know, we're going to draft anybody.
Hey, guys, these balls cost $3.50. Don't lose so many of them.
For the betterment of baseball, I wish they would just close the doors the rest of the year and let the ball players see that something has to give so that baseball people can stay in business. I think if they do that, I'm broke. I'm last of the Mohicans. I have nothing else to fall back on except the winning of a ball game and trying to get the people enthused enough to come out to see us and pay the freight through the turnstiles.
But Calvin was more than a victim of the times. More often than not, he was a victim of himself. And each incident, from the release of Harmon Killebrew to the stream of departing free agents, made Calvin seem less like an embattled old schooler who was standing his ground and more like a miserly skinflint who refused to do what had to be done to build a winner. And if his fiscal policies offended a share of the baseball community, his remarks to a Lions club in Waseca offended just about everyone else. It's one thing to be called cheap, it's another to be called racist. And despite an apology to the people of Minnesota, Calvin's reputation reached an all-time low, and in some minds, he'll never be forgiven.
Maybe if the uproar is great enough, he'll change his policies and he'll start treating his players well and really trying to do something to build a team that the fans and the players believe in. I don't see that happening, though.
Calvin has faced his share of criticism through the years, but even his toughest critics will readily admit that he does have a keen eye for Major League talent, an ability that should bode well for the Twins during his management tenure under Carl Pohlad. As an owner, though, it's ironic that a move to the Metrodome 2 years ago was to be Calvin's last grasp at baseball survival here in the Twin Cities. After all, a dome stadium is a sign of the times, and these are times in which Calvin just could not compete.
We're not selling, my sister and I, to sell to get out of baseball. We get out of baseball, we maybe sign their death warrant. We don't want to sign their death warrant. That's all there is to it. Baseball is our life, and we're going to stay in it as long as we can. All right, gentlemen, the jury is out.
Calvin Griffith was misunderstood by a lot of people, but in the time I've known him, I found him to be a fine man, and I'll tell you, I think not only myself, but a lot of folks will miss him as an owner.
I liked his candor. He said what he thought. He never
There's no doubt about
beat
that.
around the bush. Incredible. Well, thank you, Bob. Now we want to turn to the man taking over the Twins ball club, Carl Pohlad.
Now, this man is not well known outside of the business community, not yet anyway. But those who do know him say that although he is not flamboyant, he's willing to take risks. Pat Milan has the profile.
Carl Pohlad is a very wealthy man. The list of businesses that he owns is almost unending. Bankshares Incorporated owns 4 lending institutions, including the Twin Cities' third largest bank, F&M Marquette. MEI, a Pohlad holding company, has grown to become the world's third largest Pepsi-Cola bottler. Carl Pohlad serves on the board of directors for Continental and Texas International Airlines. He once owned the Flamingo Hotel in Vegas. He is known for takeover bids aimed at troubled companies, a reputation that led Forbes magazine in 1979 to call him the banker who likes poor risks.
There's more to that than that. He'll go in on poor risk, but it won't be a poor risk for him.
Kurt Carlson's companies have Carl Pohlad as a member of the board of directors. A close personal friend, Carlson says Pohlad's purchase of the Minnesota Twins is not motivated by ego, but rather it's strictly business. In an era where professional sports franchises are owned by egomaniacs who are seeking out publicity, will Carl Pohlad be overshadowing like George Steinbrenner is with his New York Yankees? Or even a bad boy renegade like LA Raiders' Al Davis? Or outrageous as Calvin Griffith has been in the past with the Twins? Not a chance, according to Carlson, who says Carl Pohlad will be powerful but quiet.
Carl Pohlad will maybe a little bit like Max Winter. He'll be laid back, very thoughtful in his opinions. I don't think Carl will be anything like a Steinbrenner. I don't think he'll be throwing his opinions around or be flamboyant because it just isn't his nature.
Pohlad's quiet way was evident throughout the entire negotiation process. While others flocked before the cameras with talk of ticket buyouts and giveaways, Pohlad remained behind the scenes and almost out of sight. Merlin Dewing, who formed the Major League Baseball task force to save the Twins long before it became a hot issue, believes that Pohlad's style is just what the Minnesota Twins need to once again become a successful sport franchise.
And I don't want to contrast Calvin and Carl. That's perhaps not fair, but that's really the contrast that you'll see. Carl will come across like a very professional, respected owner with a strong interest in the fans, and that will translate into a very good product.
With Pohlad as the new owner, there will be promotions, real promotions to draw fans back to baseball. Not like the Griffith idea of promotions like Nuns Day that were a marketing nightmare.
Look for new uniforms bearing a new team logo, and look for television and radio advertising. But most of all, the people who know Carl Pohlad say look for organization, because Carl Pohlad will put the professional back into professional baseball that has been missing for so long from the Minnesota Twins. Pat Milan, Channel 5 Eyewitness News at the Metrodome.
All right, coming up next, we'll change the subject. Dave Dahl.